Morning to you. Let's first talk about we're going to get to what's going to happen in 24 about our own budget, but let's talk about the budget situation as it relates to providing funding to Israel and to Ukraine, and to the extent you think that there's any chance that any money is going to be sent that direction, given where you folks all are in those discussions.
Well, I think the question is more for Chuck Schumer in the Senate, because we've passed funding for Israel. We've offset that. I think that's the responsible thing to do. Andrew, you know all the data on where we are as a nation in terms of our indebtedness. I think the projections next year are $1 trillion just to service the debt. That's just the interest payment. So we're in a bad way in terms of our fiscal affairs and in rapid decline. So I think that's the right thing to do. Now, we can negotiate what the offset is, but I'm proud that Speaker Johnson is changing the course here in Washington and the culture and restoring fiscal responsibility. Now, on Ukraine, I think the issues there are different. We need clear strategies. We need an end game. We need to define success. And I sent a letter to OMB Director Young well over 30 days ago. I think she's weeks overdue to respond, to give a full accounting of how much money we've spent. It's not just the $114 billion we appropriated. There have been reprogrammed and repurposed funds from other accounts, and the Constitution is clear. I mean, literally explicit in that we should have an accounting of all public monies. We haven't gotten a response yet. So I think the onus is on the president for the things I just mentioned with respect to Ukraine. And then here's the final piece. We've got to secure the border. We've got to address the first and most important security threat to the American people, and that's the southern border. And we get nothing. Yeah.
Let me ask you this, though. The risk of not providing funding to Ukraine is what, in your mind? Meaning, let's say that the border doesn't get done the way you want it to get done. Obviously, there's a debate about how the border should get done with the Democrats. Even take the funding piece off the table. We could debate the IRS, defunding, funding the IRS. How critical or not is the Ukraine of it all?
I think we have a security interest to support Ukraine. I've maintained that this entire, for over almost 2 years now. I think we should fight alongside, not with our soldiers and sailors, but in terms of targeted security support, supporting our allies against our enemies. And I think we've gotten some return on investment there. I mean, 5%, which is what we've spent relative to our entire defense budget, for 5%, we've wiped out 50% of Vladimir Putin's fleet of tanks, for example. I mean, 300,000 plus Russian soldiers have died, and the Ukrainians are fighting with tremendous vigor. And so I don't have a problem with supporting our allies against our enemies. It's the way we're doing it. And I think the first imperative in national security and the first priority is the border, period. And we've gotten nothing. So, and we're losing tens of thousands of people to the drugs that are coming across, the crime, the terrorists. All of these are record numbers. And we have zero interest in doing these other things until we secure the border and stop this nonsense.
Well, so Chairman, that's what I want to ask you. So there are these I hate to call them chess pieces, but there's sort of these chess pieces, all of which have important priorities. And I think you and I will both agree the border is a critical issue. I'm sure we can debate, which component parts of how you deal with the border, and that's clearly there's a nuance.
Sure.
I think the Republicans and Democrats want to deal with the border. They just want to deal with it maybe in different ways, and that's part of the problem. But when you hear the president and the administration say that not providing funding to Ukraine or not providing funding to Israel is an existential issue, not just for Ukraine and for Israel themselves, but for the role of America in its agreements and its arrangements with its allies, do you buy that? Do you not buy that? Does it change the dynamic forever?
I think context is important with that statement, and I think we should invest in supporting allies. Israel, for sure, long-standing, deep relationship. And we've been there for them, and we'll be there for them through this war with Hamas. I think you can argue that there is a national security interest there in Ukraine. That's why we've spent over $100 billion to date. However, we have a bigger threat in my mind as the budget chairman, as I look at the $34 trillion in debt, the 125% debt to our economic output, which is higher than World War II, and we're in relative peace and prosperity. So sovereign debt crisis and a border crisis, I think, are bigger threats, and we're not responsibly addressing those. That has to come first.
So, Chairman, final issue then. Let's talk about the IRS, because I know that is the offset at the moment that's on the table as it relates to all this, to the extent that any of this even has an opportunity to even be put forth in a meaningful way anymore. But I will tell you my own view. It always has seemed that the IRS, at least from all the projections that people have made, and not just projections, but real life experience, that when you put more money into the IRS, you actually get more money on the other side. And so it's not this idea that it's a pay for. It's like, it looks to me like a pay for in a very short-term basis, but on a very long-term basis, if you actually care about the debt or deficit, it makes no sense. What do you think?
Well, I think that if we actually had pro-growth, pro-work, pro-energy policies, we would see record revenue to the Treasury like we did prior to paying people not to work, higher taxes and regulations and the like. That's the failed economic policies of this administration. But look, we need to enforce the tax laws, no question about it. Do we need $80 billion? Do we need tens of thousands of IRS agents to shake down 70% of our working families and lower and middle income? I think that we need to be targeted. We need to utilize technology. There's a better, smarter, and lower cost way to address that tax gap. But look, meanwhile, they're projecting, by the way, over 10 years, $100 billion in more revenue as a part of this, tens of thousands of new IRS agents. We improperly pay waste, fraud, and abuse $250 billion in 1 year. $80 billion in Medicaid alone. We could pay for Israel. We could pay for the whole Israel package, Andrew, by just requiring a Social Security number for people who use the child tax credit. That is $22 billion in savings. If we had a work requirement, like we do in the food stamp program for Medicaid, just so we make sure that we have work-capable adults working in this country, which we desperately need, that's billions of dollars. We have other pay-fors besides IRS. That's just one, I think, reasonable one, but we have many others.